Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Uh, Today's guest is Sean Barnes, who is a clinical researcher, psychologist at Rocky Mountain MREC. Now, what does MREC stand for? MIRECC.
Yeah, so it's MIRIC. It's Mental Illness Research Education and Clinical Center. They are centers that have been set up by the government as part of the VA to focus on different mental health topics. And the one out at the Rocky Mountain Regional VA in Colorado and the sister site in Salt Lake focus on veteran suicide prevention.
So you're specifically a research psychologist. Is that separate then? So does that mean that your primary mode is research as opposed to clinical psychologist?
So I'm my doctor. It's in clinical psychology, and then I'm a clinical research psychologist. Mostly, it's just the title, the work title that I was hired under. I did some like a postdoctoral fellowship with the MIRIC in treatment development and evaluating different types of interventions. So that's why I get the research tag too. So I try to straddle both worlds and not be stuck in the ivory towers. They say too much. I definitely love working with patients and clients, and really I'm here today just outside of my role in the VA. Just looking forward to talking to you as a person. I'm affiliated with the University of Colorado and the VA, but I'm always supposed to give the disclaimer that nothing I say necessarily represents the opinions of any of those organizations or the government in general. And I'm happy to be off the clock talking to you today.
I appreciate you being off the clock and talking to us also. When I was going through my master's program, one of my papers was on African American male suicide rates.
Yeah.
You could really get very specific in terms of studying suicidality, whether you're talking about eating disorders, race, socioeconomic status, religions, all those different things. What, as a clinical researcher, what question are you trying to answer?
That's a great one. So there are several different questions, but I think most of them boil down to what makes living worthwhile for people. So I think the field has made a lot of progress and done a lot of great work on helping people navigate suicidal crises and kind of cope. A lot of work around safety planning and mean safety, making sure that people don't have like immediate access to things they could kill themselves with if they are feeling suicidal. I think that those are really important. But over the years, I've done a fair amount of work on the inpatient unit, and often people would come through who would have like a really good safety plan. They were insightful people. They were checking the boxes they were supposed to check. But they would say, well, I've never, like, it's, I've got a good plan, but I never use it. And usually that was because when they're at their deepest, darkest hour, they just didn't have the motivation to. It was hard for them to see why it was worthwhile. So a lot of the work that I've been trying to do is applying acceptance and commitment therapy to suicide prevention, and really focusing on, like, how do we help people get back in touch with their values and the things that they care about, and doing things, even with their depression or whatever other issues they might be facing. Even with that stuff on board, how do we get them to start making their days meaningful, so that it's worth the pain that they might have to experience to move forward from where they're at.
That makes a lot of sense, Sean, because it's one thing to ask someone to not end their lives or complete suicide. It's
Mhm.
another thing to give them a reason to stay and hang around,
Yeah.
right? It's like if you're going to
Mhm.
invite them in, make sure it's got a few amenities,
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
and for and so you're talking about values of realigning with your values. Do you find that it's people having kind of been disconnected from their values as one of the contributing factors to suicidality?
Yeah, definitely. I think, just as humans, we're really good at problem solving and trying to figure out how to, solve our emotions and make ourselves feel better in the moment. And usually, that ends up looking like lots of different ways of avoiding distress, right? So maybe I start drinking or doing drugs or just isolating, so I don't need to come up against those tough emotions, or I get some reprieve from them. But over time, that just totally erodes the meaning that people find in their lives. As they lose those interpersonal connections, they might lose touch with the ways they've been contributing, and their lives become about avoiding pain.
Right, that it's kind of like they're spending their whole life running away from a thing, so they're never really
Mhm.
engaging with anything. And
Yeah,
over time, it's you can only run so far, right, before you have to sit
yeah.
down somewhere, and then there's nowhere for you to sit or no one to sit with you, right?
Yeah, and it's this total, double-edged sword. Like, the human mind is, we've just, like, as a species, it's amazing how successful we've been, in shaping our environments, extending our lifespan. But the same thing that helps us, do complex problem solving and, being able to have the rich lives we can have, also can make us prisoners of our own minds. Like, when you are stuck, ruminating about the past, or, re-experiencing traumas, or just worried about the future, you're, oftentimes missing out on whatever it might be in the present moment that would be, reinforcing and valuable.
You talked about reminiscing on the past, or ruminating on the past, or worried about the future, and you kind of lose touch with the present moment. Is there value in looking at the past and looking towards the future? How does and what would that look like? What would be a healthy way of looking backward and looking forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what, like I said, what has made us so successful as a species is that we can do that, in a meaningful way, and understanding where we felt most vital and connected in the past, is a good way to guide us towards what might be a rich future for us. And also, helps us, hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that we've made. uh, to the extent that um, thinking about mistakes in the past inform the future, make you more able to know how you want to respond to a similar situation next time. Um, then that's all very beneficial. It's just when we get stuck in it, and it's, you're not going anywhere. You're just beating yourself up, or beating the world up, or whatever else it might look like. That it becomes problematic.
You brought up a great point. It's about looking at mistakes from the past so that we can avoid those, going into the future. And a lot of times, it's that idea of when we're in it, it's hard for us to see where we made the mistakes. I think a lot of us
Hmm.
think that we figured out where the mistake was made, and it may be a mistake but not the core mistake, and so then we
Hmm.
still end up repeating it. When we look at cognitive behavioral therapy, and I know you
Hmm.
subscribe to ACT, they look at the thoughts as being like, let's look at what you were thinking at the time and start there.
Hmm.
Where does ACT start? Where does acceptance and commitment therapy start in terms of dissecting mistakes and how to move forward?
Well, I think so. That's a really good question. One nice thing about acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, is just that it is more kind of process based. So you can come in at different angles depending on where someone's at. Often, it'll be related to kind of just what has been keeping somebody stuck. and what they want their behavior to look like in the future, and in terms of like connecting with what's important to them in their life, what their values are, and thinking about how we can move them in a direction of living more consistently with that. So really, like everything boils down to um, we kind of evaluate things based on whether it's helping someone move in a direction that's important. But that can start from looking at someone's pain, because our we don't care about uh, or things that we don't care about can't or tend not to really hurt us. We get uh, upset or stuck on things that are important to us. So sometimes it could start, looking at pain, or it could look at more of like the sweet spots, places where we've felt more connected and vital.
So we're looking at pain, we're looking at connection as a guidepost for what we value. And
Hmm.
when you say pain, can you talk to us about more of what that is? And I'm asking because I think a lot of us are in pain and we're not aware of it because we're comparing our situation, our state to someone else's. And we think,
Hmm.
well, I'm not in that kind of pain, so I must
Sure.
not be in pain. Can you talk to us? Is
Yeah.
there a hierarchy of pain?
I don't know if there's a hierarchy. I mean, I think pain comes in many different forms, right? So it could be physical pain, it could be emotional pain, and often will. I think it's important to recognize that pain is part of life. I think our society sometimes can sell a version that we should be able to reach this state of, we problem solve until we reach a state of happiness, where we've got the right stuff, we've got the right relationships, and life is just good and happy. When in reality, pain's a necessity, whether that's emotional pain that's telling you kind of where you might be going off course, or physical pain. Yeah, I think like a nice analogy is just, when you put your hand on a stove, you want to be able to feel it. You need to know to pull away.
Uh,
And then things get messy when we get like, kind of false signals from our body around uh, pain that isn't from a source that's sort of a true signal, I guess.
Yeah, is there? For I'm speaking for me and just from other people I've talked to. I feel like a lot of us are confusing pain for discomfort.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? And so it's something we're uncomfortable. We're calling it pain, but they're both signals as to which direction to move in. I see you nodding your head.
Hmm.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there. I mean, pain's a word, so there are a lot of different ways we can interpret it, things we can put on it, but um, typically, it's like some sort of unwanted physical or cognitive emotional sensation, and there's people talk about there being kind of like primary or like pure pain, like that hand on the stove situation, and then there being more like secondary pain or suffering, where in addition to the hand on the stove, we spend time beating ourselves up about what an idiot we are that we burnt our we burnt our hand, and wishing that we hadn't burnt our hand, and there's that extra layer of uh, kind of mental anguish that can come above and beyond the initial hurt.
So it's more of like the perception of the pain, or the what how we're labeling why we feel a certain way, or it's like, oh,
Yeah.
of course I feel like this, because I'm no good, I'm inadequate, all
Mhm.
these different things, versus of course I feel like this because I put my hand on a stove and
Right.
or someone hit me, of course I feel pain in my
Yeah.
arm. It's about like what you're attributing the pain to.
Yeah. Exactly.
When we look at acceptance and commitment therapy, you said it's more process oriented.
Mhm.
So when someone comes in and they say that they are wanting to end their life, where are we starting? Are we looking at their pain points? We're looking at the loss of connection. Where are we guiding them from there?
I think it really depends on the person and kind of what they're most open to. But I think starting with where they're at, a lot of times that is the pain, kind of understanding their experience and sort of their perception of how they've come to the place they're at. Um, we do. Um, so there's a lot of work that can be done, kind of looking at um, the different ways they've tried to get rid of their unwanted thoughts and emotions, physical sensations, and kind of how they've been trying to problem solve things, how things have worked for them, and really getting to a place where um, we can help them see this like control agenda that we kind of get taught, like this idea that we should be able to get rid of unwanted thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and like being able to regulate your emotions, being able to not fly off the handle. As a father of the young kids, I totally don't want my kids to like not learn any emotional control. But when we're like over controlled and spending all of our time trying not to feel things, that keeps us stuck. And a place that kind of starts where a lot of good work can start, I think, is by helping people shift their focus from not feeling their experience, from avoiding pain, from avoiding symptoms of different disorders, to what they want their life to be about. So can they be willing to have their pain and move in a direction that's important to them? And ACT does a lot of, I think ACT clinicians do a lot of cool work to help people change their relationship with their thoughts and emotions in a way that allows them to kind of build the skills to do that, and get more freedom over their behavior.
Yeah, because there's so much, like when you look at YouTube and all these new books that are being released, it's like,
Yeah.
be fearless, get rid of anxiety,
Mm.
the cure for depression, like
Mm.
everything's, it's like we're trying to detox our bodies, detox food, detox like we want like 100% antibacterial, like we just are trying to
Yeah.
wipe out everything, all the germs, all
Right.
the bullies. There's a zero tolerance policy for anything. And then when it shows up, we beat ourselves up because we felt like we've done the work, and I can't
Mm.
believe it's here again. And I think that,
Yeah.
I recognize that in myself of like, oh my God, I can't believe that depression has visited me again, or hopelessness.
Right. Right.
I meditated this morning and I
Yeah.
juiced and so can you talk to us about that? Because I'm sure that has to be a frustrating process for people that you've worked with, or that you found, of where you feel like, shouldn't I be done with this? Shouldn't I uh,
Yeah.
be living this Buddha life?
Well, I think that's part of the root issue, right? Is that we have this idea, the Buddha, like, life is suffering, like there's pain in life, and I think even our idea of success sometimes keeps us stuck, because I can relate to having that experience of like feeling depressed or having thoughts that like, yeah, here it comes again, and then before you know it, you're not living your life. You're stuck in your head worrying about what it might mean that you just had that thought, or what it might mean that you feel this way, or that you meditated but then you're still not you're not the way you're supposed to be, right?
Right, because we have this idea of how I'm supposed to be, which is messages that's come from family, friends, media,
Mhm.
of what a man is supposed to be, what a father is
Yeah.
supposed to be, what a wife is
Mhm.
supposed to be, what an American is supposed to be, or we have all these different boxes that we think we're supposed to check off and fit into, and when we don't measure up to that, then ultimately we feel disappointment, and
Mhm.
then we started beating ourselves up, and it becomes this rat race of
Yeah.
trying to maintain an image that no one asked us what we value and what we care
Right.
about, right? When
Yeah.
people talk about what they value, it sounds like you were saying connection and you said connection and like trying to avoid pain. But what have you found that people really value? Is it a Lexus?
Mhm.
Is it the new iPhone? What are people really valuing?
Yeah, typically not. I think when we get down to it, I think there's some basic, like, material needs that without that, it's hard to focus on um, other things. But the nice thing, I think, is that we don't all have to value the same thing. It's easy, I think, for people to. There's this idea. So, like the creators of acceptance and commitment therapy, and I'll just say too, this is not anything that I've. It's not like a brainchild of mine in any way. I'm very much just working with a therapeutic approach and kind of lifestyle developed by Steve Hayes, Kirk Stroessel, Kelly Wilson, and a bunch of the other collaborators I work with. So just to be clear, these aren't my ideas uniquely, but I think the idea about values is they're freely chosen, and that can be tricky, because we grow up. I work with veterans a lot of the times, and the the military very effectively works to get people to accept certain values that hold people together and lead to efficiency. And similarly, I think we maybe grow up in different religious communities. We have different expectations from parents or peers, and there's some people, I think myself self included. At certain points, it's like, wait, is that my value, or is that something that I've been told is my value? So there's some great work that can be done with acceptance and commitment therapy, kind of more experientially, to try and get a sense of what really is important to you. And we're not, they're not things that we need to consistently value forever. Like, people have different values in different domains of their life. So what you value as a father might be different than what you value as a friend. And and there's work that can be done to continue exploring values and seeing, and always kind of reevaluating, like, am I on track? Am I living today the way that I am intending to live today, knowing that today is going to be the full catastrophe, the mess of life. But
I love that you brought up that sometimes our values in one domain can differ from our values in another, right? My
mhm,
value as a father can be different than my value as a professor or an
mhm,
employee can be different than my values as a serviceman.
yeah,
And these different, and I would also imagine that our values can change over age. And I think that
mhm,
uh, sometimes we don't recognize that what we valued when we were in our 20s can change when we get in our 30s, can change when we get in our
mhm,
40s, or with an injury or different transitions in life. Your values, like when you're single, you run in the streets. So you
yeah.
value your friends, and now it becomes more about family and consistency and sleep. Can
Mhm.
you speak more to that? Like how values tend to change over time and helping people recognize when that happens for them?
Yeah, I think what one thing that's challenging that I haven't figured out a way around yet is that, like, there are 24 hours in a day, and even I can think about the things that are important to me, the things that I value, and things that I'd like to do every day that are connected to those. And at the end of the day, I can only choose to do so many things. So, I can think about I just turned 40. So, kind of the stage in life for me is I'm a partner, I'm a father, um, I'm working, and that's really like where I value spending a lot of my time. That's really where I like focus on doing things that are important to me within those domains. And that would have been totally different, when I was in my 20s, and will probably be totally different again when I'm in my, 60s or 70s, and my kids are, out of the house. And so I think life brings us different opportunities depending on our demands, but we always get the choice to of what we want to do with what life gives us.
Yeah, I've talked to so many people who have they value family or they value
Mm.
relationships, and for a lot of people, they struggle with losing themselves in the relationship where
Yeah.
they tend to maybe overvalue a friendship or overvalue a
Mhm.
relationship at the behest of themselves. That's not the word. At the
Mm.
sacrifice of themselves, and they
Yeah.
lose themselves. Can you talk to us about um, like setting boundaries around what we value? Because if you are a father, if you do have a job, if you have like three different roles that you're playing, it's
Mhm.
how do you set boundaries around making sure you're not uh giving yourself over too much to any particular thing?
Yeah. So um, that's a great question, and one that I think is challenging. Um, When when you think about values, or when I think about values, I try to think about how I want to be as a person. Right. So there are those different, like, I value being a friend, but I also value being like a reliable friend. I value being um, a a father, but I also value being a loving father. So there's that adverb that you put onto it, that really is more about who you are, like how you want to show up as a person within those relationships, and that, I think, creates opportunity for you to stay in touch with yourself while you're doing those things. But that doesn't change the fact that you probably have less time to be the way you want to be as a friend, maybe, relative to earlier on in your life. And I think we get into trouble, where I'll even say I get into trouble, when those values become rules. Values can kind of, they can be the carrot or the stick, uh, so to speak. So it can be something that I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm going to be a reliable father. I'm going to, drop my kids off at school. I'm going to do these things around the house, or, whatever it is. Um, and that's great when it's something I'm doing because I want to. But I can also be the the flip side of that, is where it's like, this is the way I have to be, and when I fall short, I punish myself for it. Right. So it's the stick at that point, and instead of leading to like flexible behavior, where I can try to respond in a way that's thoughtful, um, and like of my volition, it becomes uh makes more for more rigidity, like where we're like forced into that role, and things need to be a certain way, or else that's not acceptable. uh,
Yeah, you use that word messy, and a lot of the research I've read is people, who struggle with suicidal thoughts, tend to be more perfectionistic and don't
mhm,
like things to be messy at all, and uh,
mhm,
expect things a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. How do you? It's one thing to say be flexible and have flexible thinking.
sure.
Um, how do you practice that, or how do you? You got the week coming up ahead of you. Are you one of those, like, you take Sunday to look at your week? Like, how do you prepare um for mess? Or
Yeah. I very much feel like I use acceptance and commitment therapy on myself to try and figure things out as I'm going through life. So it's not at all like I've got stuff dialed in, and I know just what to do and just what everybody else should do. There's a really nice metaphor that gets used in act sometimes, where it's like you talk about, as a therapist, you could talk to your client about how it's like they're, hiking up a mountain. And when you hike up a mountain, you're trying to get to the top. There are different forks in the road, and sometimes, it's a switchback. You need to be headed back down in a different direction that you might not have anticipated. And that as therapists, our hope is to be able to, kind of shout to you and give you some directions about, which way you might want to go, or what to take into consideration as you're like navigating things. But it's not because we're like these realized beings standing at the top of the mountain because we've conquered life, right? Instead, we're climbing our own mountain on the other side of the valley, trying to figure things out for ourselves. But we've got a little perspective, a little more space, to hopefully be helpful with. And I think that's, it also kind of applies to um, your your personal experience. I think working with the mess of life becomes more manageable when there's a space, between the stimulus and the response. That's a kind of related to like a Frankel quote, like where we have a moment, like a split second often, where we get to live, where we get to decide how we want to respond to something that's happened. And when we can't see our thoughts and emotions, when we're acting from them instead of like viewing them and then acting like with the knowledge of them, uh, it's really difficult not to just be on autopilot and kind of be, knocked around by our thoughts and emotions. But if we can, practice mindfulness and kind of build that muscle of being able to observe our experience and get some distance from it, then it puts us a little bit more in the driver's seat, um, and we can act in a way that is hopefully gonna make the best of whatever the situation is that we're up against.
Yeah, it was such a great book, Viktor Frankl's Man's
Yeah,
Search for Meaning. A
yeah,
thin book, powerful book.
yeah.
I think an
Agreed.
international bestseller.
Hmm.
And so you talked about how there's a space between stimulus and response, and it's a
Hmm.
split second. It's so fast, where we get to live in that space and observe, and
Hmm.
and maybe get some distance on what we're experiencing in that moment. Are there some practical ways that we can do that? Because it sounds challenging. Been so many times where I'm like, I know what I'm doing, and I know
Hmm.
I should not be doing this, or this is not effective or healthy for me, and then I do it anyway. How do we zoom out? How do we observe and get some distance on the emotions of the on the pain?
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. I think I've heard meditation described as something that's like simple but difficult, which I think is really accurate. Um, and a lot of times, mindfulness practice is more about not being on autopilot. So more of the informal practices are about, paying attention when you, brush your teeth, when you eat your food, when you hold your child, when you exercise. So for just moments of life, really showing up and noticing the physical sensations. Even simple things like walking are so complex when you take time to notice them.
I love that because it sounds like what you're saying is that um, instead of waiting until you are in a moment of despair or
Mhm.
hopelessness or spiraling out, it sounds like what you're saying is this idea of mindfulness is a practice and something we should be practicing in moments where we are calm, when things are neutral, and not waiting until the building is on fire to figure out how
Yeah.
to use the fire extinguisher and where the exits are.
Yeah, that's spot on. Really well put. Yeah, I think i- it's tough to, you know, y- y- human minds tend to, we tend to react more on instinct when we're in places of like extreme distress. And, fire safety gets used as an example a lot. I can remember growing up how many times I was told to stop, drop, and roll. I think a lot of us were. And you still see, I mean, unfortunately, people catch on fire and run because it's just the urge to get away from that pain is so strong. So, the whole purpose of stop, drop, and roll is to practice something so it becomes more automatic, to have a plan in place before you get in the crisis. And that's the same thing, that safety planning is about, kind of making a plan for how you might deal with a suicidal crisis when you get there, knowing that when we're at our, kind of deepest, darkest moments, or, however that might show up for somebody, um, eh, our ability to solve problems, our perspective on the world, um, our drive to live life, um, isn't going to be representative or kind of at our full ability compared to how we might be when we're doing relatively okay. So a lot of the suicide prevention work really is preparing for that. The those dark moments, that those worst times. Yeah. So same thing with mindfulness, right? I think ideally you want to, especially when you're starting out, do things that are like basic, kind of just showing up to experiences. And then there are more formal practices, that people can do. I think mindfulness has definitely gotten just in the last 20 years really become part of our culture in a way that it wasn't before, and a lot of times overlaid with relaxation or kind of this striving to like reach a certain state or escape an emotion, and that's not the way we use it in acceptance and commitment therapy. Instead it's just about showing up to what's present, and there are a lot of ways that people can um, you know have like do more like breath meditations, body scans. There are some great opportunities to build that muscle, but it takes time, it takes practice.
Yeah, Winston Churchill called his depression the black dog.
Yeah.
And, when he realized that, this was just going to keep showing up.
Mhm.
There was no cure or any fix for it. He couldn't run from his depression. He was like, "Oh yeah, that's my black dog over there," and befriended it. Are there techniques like that in act therapy? Like it could be because what I hear you saying is let's not run from it.
Mhm.
Let's be present with the pain.
Mhm.
How are there tools or skills or techniques? And I know that I've had Stephen C. Hayes on here
Yeah, yeah, I
and
listened to
talking
that
about it.
episode. It was a good one.
So don't worry about repeating what he said because
Yeah.
the listeners need to hear it again if you
Mhm.
feel like it's redundant. And I mean, we all need to hear it over and over again. So are there ways in which we can sit with the pain versus running away from it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Churchill example is exactly like one of the things that you might do with someone, where you can look at an emotion like depression and physicalize it. You can think about, what would it look like if it was something I could hold outside of me, and it was his black dog. And then when it shows up, it's not as you're a little less likely to just get stuck in it. You can notice it as something that you can observe, and be like, oh, there it is again. Um, and based on that, decide what you want to do about it. But over time, hopefully, you learn to um, learn how to walk the dog, learn how to be with the dog, as opposed from spending all your time running from it or like spinning out when it shows up. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of experiential work in acceptance and commitment therapy that's in service of giving people that space, kind of changing their relationship with their thoughts and emotions so they can see them as thoughts and emotions, so they can see them as something that they can watch and observe, and not just be driven by.
So you said you have how many kids do you have?
I have two kids.
All right, two boy and a girl.
Yeah. Two boys. I've got a so currently 7, almost 8, and 5-year old.
It's interesting because as I'm getting older, I'm noticing that how emotional boys are. Like young
Hmm.
boys are, I've always thought girls were emotional, but then when I watch young boys, I'm like, they're almost like 10x more emotional than girls, and then somehow the tables turn where women become and then the tables turn again where like I'm in my 40s and I find myself crying over every little thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the When your kids, and I would imagine that they've had moments where they've been upset or angry about a thing.
sure. Yeah.
How are you walking them through their emotions?
Oh man, that's such a good question. Um, some days better than others for sure, right? I think it's easy. I mean, I think that's really one place where I find myself applying act a lot, is thinking about how I want to be as a parent, and feels like you know repeatedly seeing where I fall short of that some days, and thinking about how I want to be different next time. And I think my wife is a psychologist, and I think we both try to, operative word being try to help them observe their emotions, help them recognize when they're upset, and kind of sit with that. Hopefully without reacting, doing the best we can to um, also not make them like ashamed of their emotions or make them squash their emotions. And also, I think we try hard to talk about what we value, as people, the way we want to be, and the way their behavior, may or may not line up with that, depending on I think that they certainly go at it a lot, especially this year with everybody being home because of COVID and homeschool. And oh man, they've spent a lot of time together. So there are times when they're just at each other. So we'll try to help them reflect on, how would you feel if your brother did that to you? Is there another way we could say that that's a little kinder? That type of a thing. That said, I definitely work with adults as a therapist, and I feel like I've got the joy of parenting is one book. I've got a bunch of books on trying to how to parent correctly, and it's still a challenge, evolving challenge for sure, and being the person I want to be in the way I want to be with my kids and helping to guide them, in that direction. Um, I think it's interesting too. I think I grew up Catholic, in like a religious family, and we. This is a lot of self-disclosure, but we're not, we don't attend church. We aren't really part of a religious community in the same way that I think I was when I was a kid. And I think that's become more common, in the United States for sure. So I think there's this interesting, sort of shift from like if religion isn't teaching the values, then how are we as people, making sure that we're how are we deciding how we want to be, or how are we deciding what's important to us? Um,
Are you using having two boys and deciding how you want to be, and also modeling for your two boys? Are you using literature, books in any way to kind of discuss values, or any type of any type of arts, or
mhm.
because they're young boys, and language at that age is you have to. I would
Yeah.
imagine have to be a bit more physical or tactile in
Mhm.
terms of uh, trying to teach them how to handle their emotions.
Yeah. I think that's a challenge for sure. I've looked a little bit, and I'd be curious too. I mean, I think like if people listen to this and have great resources, I would love to hear about them. I've seen some different cards that have like values on them that and then like different sort of like challenges, for the days, like how can we do something kind today? And I've thought about doing more of that with the kids, but I haven't found anything that felt like a great fit necessarily. But I think that would be something that'd be really cool to do, just to be more intentional with them too about thinking about how they want to be um, as people without getting too heady around things. And I think also just creating opportunities for them to, um, help others, opportunities for them to uh, be able to, hopefully get a taste of some of the, kind of committed action, some of the things that we hope that they would value.
Yeah, yeah, be in because values is such a huge part of, like you said, the thing you're trying to answer is like, why do people, what keeps people here? What do they value?
Mm.
And to keep going, because there have been so many tragedies that have taken place, whether you're
Yeah.
talking about the Holocaust or slavery, and some
Mhm.
people become undone at the end of it or during
Mhm.
it. Or in their lives, and other people somehow build upon it and move forward and
Mhm.
thrive. And uh, so we know that it's not what happens to you, it's there's something else that's tethering you to life, because if two people are going through the same experience and one moves forward, then
Hmm.
there's something else there that is beyond the experience itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're, all creatures of our history. We get shaped by what our life experiences have been and what the context is in the moment. You know, sort of shapes the way we respond. I mean, I think a lot of interesting research, on kind of that post traumatic growth or like grit, um, and it's a complicated question. I think the thing I always want to be like, make sure people uh, that that knowing that some people respond to trauma with growth doesn't become the stick, right? Doesn't become the way that they're like, I shouldn't be having this experience. I think that shows up a lot for some of the military veterans I work with. Where um, the with mental health issues can be viewed as weakness, or a liability, and they can think about people who didn't respond the way they did, and then get stuck in that. Then that becomes another layer of suffering for them. Um, so I think we all have the opportunity to work with what life gives us, and I believe and hope that. Regardless of what it is, I'll be fighting to hold on and see what the next day brings. That's also easy for me to say, having lived a fairly privileged life and not knowing everybody else's suffering. I'm all for there's like zero suicide movements, and I got into mental health not because because I want to help people choose life. I want to make it something that they can choose. And at the same time, we can't take suicide off the table. It's not something we can take away that option away from people permanently. Um, but I think what I would hope and I'm really motivated to do is uh, to help people continue to hold on, to continue to find meaning and kind of push through to see what the next day brings.
I love that. And you're to wrap it up, I know that you're working with at the VA with veterans. And is there a because you talked about how veterans they kind of are um, indoctrinated. I don't. That's a strong
Mhm.
word, but with a certain set of beliefs and values,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And then when they retire, because we know that there's a suicide rate increase for people when they
Mhm.
retire, transition, whether we're talking about servicemen or army vets or military
Mhm.
vets, et cetera, et cetera. What's the process? Is there a cycle there of, okay, this was my life for 5, 10, 20, 30
Mhm.
years. And so these were what my values were because that served a purpose
Yeah.
in this environment. And now I'm, gonna retire or I'm gonna move on to a next phase. Is there something
Mhm.
is there something in between what their values were and how that served them and what their values are going to become, and what does that look like? Because I think that it's that space that becomes scary for people of what's next, and I'm feeling like they have to know the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's you know, certainly less training coming out of the military than there is going in. There's more training for how to be in the military than there is how to be in civilian life. And I think, people are doing good work in that area and trying to be more intentional about it. But it's tough because, there are some people, who might be uh, like lower level, like infantry people, and they are doing, um, their decisions are they can be in situations where their decisions are life or death, right? There are people around them who need them to survive. They're contributing to, hopefully contributing to um, a mission or cause that's that's pure, or that they can stand behind. And then if they come out of the military and haven't had the opportunity to you know have an education, or maybe as many financial resources, or social support, they can find themselves in positions or jobs that feel very meaningless, where that they lose that sense of purpose. And that can be tough for people. So I think, reconnecting with and kind of figuring out how to what's meaningful for them in that new context is really important.
I love that. I appreciate. Is there anything that we haven't talked about, Sean, for uh, about acceptance and commitment therapy that might be of benefit to someone who may be thinking about ending their life, or maybe a military veteran who is having a hard time, transitioning to the civilian life? Is there anything that we haven't discussed?
Um, so I think there's a lot depending on who it is, right? I don't have the magic wand, or kind of exercise that it's this is what you should do. But I think the biggest thing that I would want to hopefully make people aware of is that there are resources that exist. There are these evidence based therapies that can be used to help them move forward from where they're at. And if things feel empty and painful, and just a struggle or unbearable, uh, that is not the time to make a major decision about life or death. So I think the biggest thing I would want to say is like wait. And the suicide, death is certainly coming, right, for all of us. Suicide isn't going to be off the table tomorrow. But unless you've really tried everything, there's a lot out there to um, help you reconnect with the sense of meaning and value. Help you get back to a place where you're kind of better tolerating distress, and life feels less painful.
I love that. It brought to mind the idea of, they say don't go to bed angry, right? And it's like
Yeah,
don't do anything angry. Like wait
yeah,
till the anger subsides and
yeah.
then see what's left. And then last question, and you kind of answered this, but I ask this of all
Mhm.
my guests because I always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of
Yeah.
wanting to end their life.
Mhm.
Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Sean?
Um,
Off the clock.
wait till tomorrow. Like and that's I don't mean that in a flippant way or like glib way, because I think that's easy for me to say, right? I don't know what their history is or how long they've been suffering for, and it might feel like every day has been waiting until tomorrow. Um, but I really believe that if people can, push through and wait, a lot of the time that creates opportunities. I think just so many of the people I've worked with, I think even from my own experience, like I could never have predicted that my life would be the way it is right now. And I also probably felt like, fairly certain that I knew what was coming for me, that type of a thing. And being in a place where where things are really dark, and people have felt really stuck, uh, there can be lifetimes of stuckness before opportunities emerge. And the I think one of the major first steps in that is getting help. Being willing to talk to a therapist, being willing to reach out to others, and start to find a way to think about not escaping the pain, but doing something tomorrow that's important to you.
Wow, not escaping the pain, but doing something tomorrow that's important to you. And I love that you put that in place of tomorrow. Oh, that's great. I love that. It's kind of like give yourself something to look forward to for
Yeah,
tomorrow because you can't do it right now. You're upset, so let's just
yeah.
Netflix and
Uh,
chill in it.
Yeah, and maybe it becomes today. Hopefully, right? Is the day that you're doing something that's important, and I think people get stuck. I get stuck sometimes. Thinking that things that are meaningful need to be huge. Or that they need to have these like lofty goals for themselves, and that anything less is unacceptable. But like, it can be like, I'm going to pick up trash. I'm going to, really pay attention while I walk through nature. There's so many different things where people can find meaning that are within their power, no matter what their life situation is. But finding those things can be hard when you're in that dark place. So talk to somebody else.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much, listeners, for
Can I
yeah,
can I
please
also
go
do?
ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
I didn't get a chance to do a quick shout out just to I think I have a lot of collaborators in the work that I've been doing. A few of the people that I've really have learned from and continue to do this work with are Lauren Borges, Nazi Bahraini, Robin Walser, Jeff Smith, Debbie Sorensen. And I love the ACT community, and the people who are moving this mission forward. So just a quick thank you to all of those folks.
yeah, I think you're the first one to do a shout out on the podcast. So I love following you on Twitter because you're always retweeting other colleagues, their successes and accomplishments and thoughts. So you definitely are. I can see the person that you are and that you want to be, and you definitely applaud those, as you say, your collaborators, in where you are. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you listeners for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you calling the 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK, or the million of other numbers I have listed in all of the show notes. There's there's the Trevor Project. There are international phone numbers that are listed. And if you're in Sri Lanka, Budapest, if you're in Antarctica, there is someone who is ready and willing to listen to you and help guide you through the darkness. There are chats, there are groups. All that is in each and every one of the show notes. And if you want one-on-one coaching, go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Sean.
I love it. Thank you, Leah. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.